Hello and welcome to the ALS Association Education Hour. I'm joined by many people today. I'll let them all introduce themselves because they're from different organizations and locations with different focus, I should say. And we will start it off with Amanda Lee. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to us and hearing about these research opportunities that are very important, the ALS Focus Program and the CDC ALS Registry. I'm Amanda. I'm the Associate Director for ALS Focus, and I'm joined today by Patty Stanko and Reshma Kunjani, who both work on the CDC registry, and Ron Ferretra, who's an advocate for both programs. And I'll let them introduce themselves when they get to their slides. I just wanted to open us up a little bit with a little bit of a background about why we're here. ALS Focus and the CDC registry are both research programs that people living with ALS can complete, and they can complete online. However, the programs have important differences that we're going to highlight today in the presentation. Because these programs collect different types of information, it's incredibly important for people to participate in both so that researchers can gain a wide perspective on the complexities of ALS. And so, as you'll see in the presentation, the goal of each program is a little bit different. The types of data are different. So today, Ron is going to present first on ALS Focus, and then Reshma will present on the registry. Ron is going to share his experiences with both programs, and then we'll take questions after that. So Ron, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay. Next. Hi, my name is Ron Ferretra. I'm the chairman of the ALS Association PSAP Committee. That's Patient and Caregivers Advisory Committee. We assist in the development of the ALS Focus surveys that you probably have got a few emails about. Unfortunately, some of you have not been answering the emails. I'm also on the Mid-Atlantic Advisory Council and the South Carolina Advisory Council. I'm a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the Air Force, retired in November 1995. After retirement, I became Finance Director at the City of Goose Creek in Goose Creek, South Carolina. That's the 8th largest city, by the way. For 19 years and retired from that in 2017 after my diagnosis. Got diagnosed in 2016. I fell in a surgeon's office in 2015. I was having some droop foot and I thought it was from stenosis in my back. So I went to get my back cut on. And after I fell in the doctor's office and he picked me up, he said, "Your problem is not with your back. Have you ever seen a neurologist?" And I looked at him, I said, no. So he told me I needed to see one. I got home from work that day, and there was a message from a neurologist on my phone telling me I had an appointment the next day. And there I started that typical one-year journey down the road for an ALS diagnosis. Next, please. So what is Focus? Focus is a survey program. And the goal of that survey program is to learn as much as we can from people with ALS and caregivers for people with ALS as possible. You'll hear me say many times, and Sarah's heard this, Amanda's heard this, if you don't have ALS, you really don't know what ALS is. And I don't mean that bad, but it's just kind of a fact. There's little things that we know and we don't talk about. And that's one of the most important things about the ALS Focus program is learning those kind of things. We want to get as much information together as we can about ALS. And we try to compartmentalize or categorize that, and you'll see that in some future slides. But we want to know about individual experiences about the journey. What goes on, what happens, what is good, what is bad, and what can we do in the future? Next. So ALS Focus is made up of nothing but people with ALS or their caregivers. And on the right side of the slide, you'll see some of the folks that make that up. I don't think that's everybody, but it might be. Amanda can nod yes or no to that. She's nodding no. So it is patient and caregiver led. We help determine what the surveys are going to be and what the questions are going to be. We have a fancy company that helps devise that, and Amanda kind of massages that a little bit because sometimes we don't ask questions the correct way. But it is patient and caregiver led. And it's based on our experience and our preferences. The experiences and preferences that we have are extremely important. This information goes to people that are setting up drug trials and setting up research programs. They're learning what we tell them. I've said many times, almost all the ALS patients I know in the world, if you could give them a drug tomorrow morning that stopped their ALS where it is in its tracks, they would be happy. And that goes for people that have very limited mobility to no mobility to people that have a fair amount of mobility. We all just want to stop it where it's at. That happens through research, and research only happens when we, the patients, we, the caregivers, can impart that knowledge to the researchers that are out there trying to find what's going on. Next, please. So, in these research things that we do, in these trials, we do collect data and we share that data, but that data is shared anonymously, and it goes to a thing called neutral stamp. Big word. All it means is that data is unidentified. Nobody has the ability to figure out who you are once it gets neo-stamped or unidentified. By doing that, then we can share that data with anyone in the world. There is, on any given day, there's about 700 research programs going on throughout the world. Some of these research programs are drug trials. Some of these research programs are programs that are just trying to identify how to determine if someone really has ALS without going through that 1 year to a year and a half of misery trying to find out if you really have it. So in 2020, we developed these research questions. We've done 10 different surveys. We've had about 1,700 people participate in the surveys. Now, 1,700 people, give me a break. We have a lot more people out there with ALS than 1,700 people, and a lot more caregivers to go with them. They tell me that because nobody really knows what the true numbers are because it's not a reportable disease, that there's probably about 33,000 people with ALS. So we ought to have 66,000 people doing this survey. So it is an important survey. So just really, why is it so important? It's important because we need to bring our perspectives with ALS to the world. We need to teach the world what the heck's going on. They don't know. They read about ALS. They think about the ice bucket challenge. Well, that was quite a few years ago. So they go, whatever. That didn't solve much. They think about Lou Gehrig. Well, he played baseball. I'm 75 years old and I never saw the man play, or at least I don't remember it. So people don't know about ALS. So we want to collect this data. We want to share this data with as many people as we can possibly share this data with. It's the data that's used to determine drug trials, to determine research programs, to determine which program gets money. You know, there's only so much money out there to give these research folks. So the money needs to go to the right people. These surveys help determine that. And that's what we really want to do. Think about something. I don't know if any of you got the email. I hope you all did. But the Medicare just sent out an email about, I guess it was a month ago, through the ALS Association, asking about lift capability of wheelchairs. Do people really need lift capability? Well, heck, if we had asked that question on survey number 1 and we had 66,000 people answering it, we could sure have that lift capability. Because as we all know, without lift capability, if you take a chair to your kitchen cabinets and you sit down and then you try to get something out of the cupboard, you're not getting anything out. I'll get off that soapbox. Next slide, please. Now that I've told you all you have to join this program, otherwise you're going to have to listen to me again someday. How do we do that? The easiest and best way to do it is to go to alsfocus.org. Plain and simple. And when you do that, this box in the upper left-hand corner that says ALS Focus Web Entry will show up. And if you scroll down just a little bit, depending on what size computer you have, and click here to take me to the focus surveys, it's going to take you to the slide on the right. And that slide on the right is going to say ALS Focus. And you hit that little blue button, and then you're on a roll. God, I get too much junk open here. I can't hardly see. Then you will be on a roll. Once you get there, you'll have to register if you've never registered. If you've registered already and you forgot, it will send you an email and say, hey, thanks for registering, but you've already done that. So please, just be patient and wait, and we will let you know when the next survey is. Next slide, please. So, told you we did 1,700 people respond to surveys. You'll see the first 3 surveys up there. Those are ongoing, we call them ongoing surveys. And really what they are is it's a demographic survey. We want to know who you are, what your age is, when you were diagnosed, etc. All those minor little things that you're asked every day when you go to ALS clinic, just about. Then, just like an ALS clinic, we're going to want to see an ALS FSR or FRS. And they're going to ask you what your vital capacity is if you remember. If you don't remember, the sun will still come up tomorrow morning. You can still go on. Then they'll ask you some health status questions. Below that are the regular surveys that we've done. The ones in all light blue down there, those are all surveys that are done and completed. We try to do a survey about every 3 months. At the end of 3 months, about 2 months after the survey, we close it out. Some we've left open a little bit longer, but we try to get them done in a couple of months. And then after they're done, we analyze them and we put all the data together so that it makes sense for somebody that wants to do any research on it. Next, please. So, this is what we found. We found, and I got to make this bigger because I can't read it. Let me read my slides. Sorry, I screwed up my computer big time here trying to figure out what I wasn't doing. So, we found that 1 in 4 people had a problem getting a wheelchair. They had to pay money for it, money that a lot of them don't have. That's not good. we found that 1 out of 2 people had problems getting ramps. It's really nice. We can give you a wheelchair, put you in your house, but if you don't have a ramp, all we've done is we've made you a nice prisoner in your own house, which I don't think is our goal either. So we really don't want that either. We found that 16 to 26% of the people thought the use with ALS should be starting over using their power wheelchair. We found that 80% agreed that equipment was adequate, that some equipment adequately met their needs and some didn't. Next slide, please. Found 68% of the respondents spent 20 hours a week providing care. That's an awful lot of health care when you're trying to live a semi-normal life. Think about this for a minute. If you have ALS, your partner probably can't work, and you probably can't work. So how do you pay for all that health care? That's a problem. That leads to depression a lot of times. 35% of the people said that they weren't participating in any of the hobbies or any of the athletics or activities that they used to do. So all these things are really important, and we know all of these things, but the world does not know all of these things. A few of your close friends know them. You know them. Your care workers know it. The people you see in clinic know it, but the rest of the world doesn't, and we need to teach the world that. And the easiest way for us to teach the world that, next please, Amanda. The easiest way for us to teach the world that is for us to take these ALS focus surveys. So I expect after you show this on YouTube and you have 100 participants, that we'll have 200 participants sign up for this. And we'd like to get those 200 people to go out and get another 200 people to sign up. I'd like to thank you for letting me present this today. I'm sorry for the slight mistakes I made in the sharing the screen. I'll try to get that right for the next time. On behalf of the steering committee and our working groups, we appreciate it. And we'd like to thank Mass General Hospital, who does some neurological clinical research institute stuff, and our current industry sponsors, because without Biogen and the rest of those folks, new drugs would probably never happen.
Yeah.
But please register today for the ALS Focus. And with that, I bid you goodbye.
Thanks, Ron. We do have a question. Hang on just a second. Sorry, I forgot to start recording again. Start over again, Amanda.
I just want to say, I think it's important for both caregivers and people living with ALS to sign up individually for ALS Focus, because sometimes the survey questions are the same and sometimes they're different, or we might do a survey like we've done before that just focuses on caregivers, or maybe we'll do one that just focuses on people with ALS. So it's important, if possible, to register individually. And Ron, I wanted to say, please don't leave yet, because we're going to go,
I'm still here.
Okay. On the CDC registry, which is another research opportunity. And then after that, we can take, Ron will talk more, and then we can take more questions. So Reshma, it's you're up.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Reshma Punjani. I'm from the National ALS Registry. I'm a health scientist on the registry team. And today I want to take some time to kind of go over what the National ALS Registry is, some of the components of the registry, and then also highlight some of the surveys that we offer through the registry as well. Next slide, please. So here are my disclosures for the presentation. I have no disclosures. Next slide. So here's an outline of my presentation today. So I'm going to start off by talking about how you can join the fight against ALS. First, I'm going to talk about the National ALS Registry, why it's important to join. Then I'll also go into discussing the National ALS Biorepository, discussing what it is, why it's important, and how those living with ALS could join the biorepository. Next, we'll talk about participating in clinical trials and epidemiological studies. And then finally, I'll also talk about why it's important to take the risk factor surveys. Another part of the presentation will be what the registry is doing to find the causes and risk factors for ALS. And that includes reporting on who's getting ALS across the US, the number of cases, as well as funding research and publishing research, which is a little less known about the registry. And at the end, we'll open it up for some questions and discussion. Next slide, please. So here's a good overview slide of what the National Registry, ALS Registry is and the different components of the registry. So I'll start off in the left-hand corner. The first part of the registry is research. The registry contributes to ALS research through many avenues. The second part of the registry is the National ALS Biorepository, which we will talk about a little bit later in the next slides. We also learn the epidemiology of ALS and provide that information to the public through numerous manuscripts and research papers. Another component of the registry are our partners. So for example, the National ALS Association is one of our big partners, and we collaborate with the association to do outreach and to also really understand ALS and kind of work together for finding the cure. Another component of the National ALS Registry is the survey data, and I will talk about some of the components of the survey, what topics we look at, and things like that. And then the next component is the research notification mechanism. Next slide, please. All right, so the first slide I have is talking about the overall National ALS Registry. Why is it important and why should patients join? So as you all know, there are a lot more unknowns than knowns about ALS. The registry allows people with ALS to fight back and help defeat the disease. Some of the goals of the registry are first to find out what causes ALS. Also to find out what are the risk factors that contribute to ALS. The registry also reports on the number of ALS cases in the United States, and we do that through incidence and prevalence reports, and attempts to identify every person living with ALS in the US. And how are we doing this? We're collecting and analyzing data. We're also funding external research. We, at the ALS Registry team, are a smaller team, but we know that we need a lot of people doing research. So one of the bigger components of the registry is being able to fund these external researchers that can help contribute to the knowledge. We also are connecting people living with ALS to clinical trials and research studies. And the last thing is collecting bioassessments through the National ALS Biorepository. Next slide, please. So here's some background about the importance of the registry and a little bit about ALS. So the background, of course, all of us know that ALS is not a reportable disease in the United States. And so what does this mean? It's not reported for each of the local and state levels going up to the national level. So that is a challenge because it's hard to understand how many people are living with ALS across the United States. One of the biggest challenges is that ALS is not reported to these state health officials besides in the state of Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is the only state where ALS is reported up to the state level. ALS cases from private insurance companies are also not currently captured by the registry. And the registry is a surveillance system. And so knowing how surveillance systems work, no system can capture 100% of the cases. And ALS being a non-reportable disease also makes this a larger challenge. But of course, through signing up for the registry, we're always looking to improve case ascertainment. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is talking about the risk factor surveys. I want to kind of talk about what types of surveys we have through the registry and what this information is used for. So the first thing is the information for the risk factor surveys helps researchers find clues about ALS. So some of the topics that these risk factor surveys cover are occupation, military service, physical activity, whether you have a history of smoking and drinking, also residential history and residential pesticide use. The surveys also ask about traumatic brain injuries and sports surveys. There's a survey specifically on sports. We also have one on disease progression. How is ALS progressing? Is it fast or slow progression? And what could be affecting it? And one of the last surveys we have right now is an open-ended question, and it really provides the patient perspective on what they think could be causing their disease. And like we like to say is that because we don't know exactly what is causing ALS, these risk factors serve as sort of a puzzle piece. And the more we are able to have information through these risk factor surveys, the better we're able to understand, how ALS works and different things that may be having a higher risk for ALS. Next slide, please. So that was the first component of the registry, which are the surveys. The second component, which we'll talk about, is the biorepository. And this is one way for those living with ALS to contribute to ALS research through their biospecimens. So the biorepository is important because it helps researchers in the area of ALS understand the genetics behind ALS, the biomarker identification, as well as environmental factors. And these are all factors that contribute to ALS. And so the biorepository is set up in this way to help us understand this in a deeper sense. Next slide, please. So here's some more information on the biorepository. So the National ALS Biorepository is significantly different from others because we're looking at the extensive risk factor survey data and we're linking it to the biospecimens. So like how I like to describe it is it's a complete and super data set. A person living with ALS can sign up for the National ALS Registry, be counted for their ALS case count, also complete risk factor surveys, and then that pool of data is combined with the biosamples so that when external researchers want to study ALS, they're able to come to us and request this data set. And not only are we able to provide risk factor data, but we're also able to link it to the biosamples of these persons living with ALS. Another thing is it's nationally representative. So it goes a little bit beyond the referral centers, and we have the representation across the entire US. It's a lot user-friendly as well. The way we have designed it is once someone registers for the National ALS Registry, they have an option to also enroll in the biorepository. And of course, to contribute the biospecimens, we understand that time is of the essence, so we don't ask those living with ALS to go to a clinic to do this. We set up a phlebotomist coming to their home to collect the samples, and that makes it a little bit more user-friendly. Also, the specimens are collected specifically for this biorepository, and it's only used for that purpose. Of course, there's no charge for the patients. It's user-friendly. Like I said, we come to your home. And this is the largest collection of ALS samples for research, looking at genetics, biomarkers, and disease progression. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about the surveys, registering to be in the National ALS Registry and the biorepository. Now, the next component, if you all remember, is connecting patients to clinical trials and epidemiological studies. So the first thing is patient recruitment for research can be difficult and challenging. Approximately 95% of the registry participants want to participate in research. And so what the registry does is it links those living with ALS to scientists who are currently recruiting for research. And that could be for clinical trials or epi studies as well. And this includes domestic and international researchers that can use this tool that the registry is providing to recruit. And so the way I like to describe it is when when we go to walks and things like that, I kind of think of it as like a one-stop shop so that, once you've registered, this portal of resources opens up and you're able to have that direct connection to those researchers that are actively recruiting through the National ALS Registry. And up to date, over 70 institutions have used this tool for their recruitment purposes. Next slide, please. And so here's the slide. I kept it in here just to, some of you all may be familiar with some of these clinical trials, but these are some that have used the registry to recruit for these clinical trials. Next slide, please. One more component, if you all recall, was that the registry funds research. So ATSDR CDC is funding research to learn more about ALS etiology and risk factors. 24 research studies have been funded to date. And this information that we learn also helps ATSDR prioritize topics for future risk factor surveys. So recently in September, 2 awards were funded, and new funding opportunities are announced every year as well. So this is the registry's attempt to not only do the research on our end, but also fund external researchers that are, working to expand our knowledge on ALS. Next slide, please. So here's a slide just covering areas of research that we funded. So some of the studies look at environmental risk factors, such as cyanobacteria. Some look at pesticides and pollutants. Also, the human virome for antibodies. We'll look at genetics, military service and the risk for ALS, traumatic brain injuries, oxidative stress, and environmental risk factors, the gut microbiome, and a large list of other risk factors that could be linked to ALS as well. Next slide, please. So this is kind of my conclusion slide on the National ALS Registry. So just a quick overview. It is the largest database of ALS patients in the United States for research. We collaborate with pharmaceutical companies and academia to provide recruitment assistance for clinical trials and epi studies. The National ALS Biorepository is also advancing ALS research on biomarkers, genetics, and environmental exposures. We're also funding research grants so that we're able to learn more about risk factors and possible etiologies of ALS. We're also determining national epidemiological trends, such as how many cases of ALS are in the US. And overall, we're looking to solve the who, the what, and the why of ALS. Next slide, please. And so in conclusion, the National ALS Registry and the ALS Association are vital partners, and we have the same goal of curing ALS. And just the take-home message is that this research counts on you, and you can be a part of it as well. Next slide. I'll open it up for questions, and here is our website where you can go to join the registry, as well as our email address that's available if you have any questions or need any assistance. Thank you all.
I think here is, Ron, where we were interested in if you wouldn't mind just speaking for a few minutes about your experience with the CDC registry.
Yeah, and I was going to ask if others want to share too, because I do believe that there are others.
The one thing about the ALS registry that's extremely important is really registering with it. Also, it's a great source to find out about research programs. They will email you on a regular basis and say, we have this trial that's going on, or this research program that's going on. One of the biggest problems researchers seem to have is actually finding people to get involved in research. I know it's crazy to say, but The ALS Association funds the NEALS program, which is the Northeast ALS Symposium, and they actually bring in everyday people to that symposium to explain to them about research programs. I was lucky enough to attend last fall, and it was amazing to hear from the researchers that were there that they can't get people into the programs because people don't know about them. So if you get into this registry, you will find out about the programs. Yes, there's a lot of surveys in there, but you don't have to do them all at once. You can take a few days or a few weeks to do them. But I really, really would encourage everyone not only to enroll in the ALS Focus program, but the CDC registry program, because they are both vitally important for researchers and for trying to make ALS a livable disease.
Thank you, Ron. And then I just want to really quick share. We've heard about 2 research programs today, and I know it can seem confusing sometimes, just the similarities and differences. So we have this table, and I'll also just explain. There are overlapping features between the CDC registry and ALS Focus. They both involve surveys that ask about your life experiences. They both report the data anonymously, are IRB reviewed, so reviewed by a board that makes sure the data is safe. And they both use the neurostamps to de-identify participants. Some differences are that Focus has new ongoing surveys throughout the year that are on different topics. So the goal is capturing people's needs and opinions to improve ALS programs and policies on specific topics. The CDC registry counts cases of ALS, as you heard, and analyzes things like environmental risk factors. And the CDC registry surveys you take one time and you're done, as opposed to Focus, where it's you continue to participate in new surveys. The Focus data is on our website and free for anyone to access and use. And the registry data is requested through CDC. Focus is also open to caregivers as well, while the registry currently is not for caregivers, just for people with ALS. Focus is run through the ALS Association, if that wasn't clear, and it's guided by the PCAC that Ron's part of. And then, of course, the registry is run through CDC, although we partner to promote it. So both programs, as I said earlier, are super important to participate in, so researchers can understand more about these dynamic, complex aspects of living with ALS and work to improve ALS care based on your input into these research programs.
Amanda,
Mm-hmm.
can I just ask a quick question? I know the registry is specific for ALS. Remind me, the ALS Focus, can folks with PLS do that or no?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I can help to answer that.
Thanks.
If that's all right. I'm Sarah Provante. I work with Amanda on ALS Focus and Ron as well, and with Patty on the CDC registry and Reshma. So wonderful presentations. And just to answer your question, and Focus is for people with ALS. In our screener questions, we do ask if people have ALS or if they're caregivers. So if they do belong, in those groups, then they can participate.
Thanks. Other questions, or I also want to give space. I know sometimes when you hear somebody else present, you're like, oh, I should have said this. So I also want to invite Amanda or Ron or Reshma, if there's something you want to add, feel free.
We are going to send you, I don't know whether it's going to be Amanda or me, one of us is going to send you the all of the links to the different things that we talked about.
Thank
so that
you.
you can put them out there.
Let me pause this. Sharon raised.
I can't answer about, can you localize it? But I will tell you that one of the first things that we talked about, and Sarah can attest to this, when we started talking about the PSAP, was that we were not going to have long surveys. Because the minute somebody said to me, we're going to do surveys, the first thing I thought about is what you just said, Sharon. So we really try to keep the surveys limited to somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. So, but I can't answer the localization. I know that if there is travel involved, ask the question. I asked the question about a drug trial with Biogen, and Biogen is footing the bill for me to do an awful lot of travel back and forth to do a drug trial. So you have to ask the question, because some are fully funded and some aren't.
So Sharon, thank you for both of your questions. I'll kind of go in from the registry perspective, especially for when the clinical trial notification does go out. Sometimes it goes out to a larger group, and that is to kind of have the net be a little bit larger to make sure more people are included. But like you mentioned, that if it is a geographical location, it may be a little bit further, but we will kind of take that advice into consideration and, think if there is a way to target it more, especially if it is a more, geo-specific clinical trial. So that is something, a good point that you brought up. And going back to the 18 surveys, we have heard it loud and clear, that the 18 surveys are a lot. So, rest assured that we are also on our end working on making the surveys redesigned. All of this, as you all probably know, we have to go through several levels of clearance, OMB approval, things like that. But we are working on our end to make it sort of a smart survey so that when you answer a first set of survey questions, if certain questions don't apply to you, those questions won't even come up. And they're going to be all reorganized into 5 larger sections, which is going to, one, reduce time burden on, people living with ALS. And also it's going to kind of streamline all of the information that is being requested, and it'll make it a lot more user-friendly. So, just stay tuned. Once that new survey redesign is approved and launched, we will share that information through all of the channels, and hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to complete.
We don't have to redo it, do we?
No. Your information is good to go. It's for the newer, registrants.
Other comments that you want to share? Thank you so much, all of you. This is really helpful, and I think both of these are just something that I'm with you, Ron. I'm always like, why aren't people doing these? This is such important information, and I think you've really clarified how important and how easy it can be, and then how this is used. I think the other piece is, we don't want to waste people's time. And to know that it really is valuable research is really helpful.
We joined late, but I got a question. How do we know if we're registered or not? Because I've heard different things, like my dad is through the VA, so I've heard they might have registered us.
They did not.
Okay, so we need to do that. And when does
somebody
when
want to clarify that? I'm guessing you have to answer a whole bunch of surveys, so.
So I can mention the registry component. So our registration is a self-enrolled portal. So unless you've gone in and enrolled in the registry, you won't be in the registry. We do receive data from admin databases, and I think that's might be the information that you're hearing is from administrative databases, but to complete the surveys and to be in the registry, for all the resources that I discussed earlier for the Biorepository, the clinical trials, you would have to go in and actually register in our portal.
And I will
And-
send those links out.
When does
that
it
Ron
become a
mentioned.
smart survey?
I'm ready for it as, as quick as you all are. It's been in the works, but we don't have any timeline that's up to OMB. So, stay tuned, but hopefully soon. Hopefully we have some good news soon.
Well, I'll go in, I'll do all the surveys and it should be like the next day.
Okay. You can still sign up right now. So there's nothing stopping you from signing up, still looking at what the biorepository is, being connected to the clinical trials. So don't let the 18 surveys stop you from, at least joining the registry. You can always go back and do the surveys later.
And you don't have to do all the surveys all at one sitting.
That sounds like a good plan. I'm gonna put you on. You wanna look at this?
And you can sign up for ALS Focus right now. We